Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some updates on the Russia-Ukraine war. We know recently, within the past week, it's officially been announced a current pause and hopefully a full resolution, at least a resolution that lasts throughout Trump's term, to the Hamas-Israel conflict. And so everyone shifts their attention as long as this current peace deal ceasefire holds. What's going on with Eastern Europe? We know that this is really Russia's war. If they want to end it, they can. Recently, a few months ago, Trump meets Putin in Alaska. There's been talks. There's still mutual respect. There's a recent phone call that was initiated by the Kremlin between Putin and Trump. And you can see after a long phone call, Trump has announced he will be meeting Putin in Hungary, possibly to try once again to end the Russia-Ukraine war, saying, quote, President Putin and I will then meet in an agreed upon location, Budapest, Hungary, and says again is trying to bring this war to an end. So, at this point, people are not really getting their hopes up, but at some point, you have to think about it. There are reports and there's murmurs that, well, it depends. Is Russia weakening in terms of their overall support for this war? It's lasted 3.5 years, almost 4 years at this point, 4 years in February. Where is Russia at in terms of resource and monetary expenditure in comparison to the amount of land they're gaining within Ukraine? Trump has offered peace plan after peace plan, including the annexation of 2 far eastern Ukrainian oblasts, along with the recognition of Crimea as part of Russian territory. Putin apparently doesn't want that. They want more land. They want more negotiating leverage. And they very likely also want some type of longer-term alliance or agreement with the United States. Throughout all of this, Donald Trump originally came into office, and there was this Republican sentiment that we need to be very, very stern on staying out of the conflict in Europe. Trump stopped the funding immediately to Ukraine. Zelensky comes to the White House. It doesn't go well. Remember that back in, when was that, like March 1st, February 28th, something like that. And then recently, because of the inactivity from Russia in terms of them not wanting to negotiate, Trump has said, well, I have no choice but to now fund Ukraine and fund them in a way that is really through the Western European powers by selling them weapons, and then the Western European powers give the weapons to Ukraine, but also through the mineral deal with Ukraine and directly funding Ukraine. The idea there is we're going to get the money back via the rare earth minerals within Ukraine. Through those two sources, you must fund Ukraine because Russia doesn't want to come to the negotiating table. And if you don't fund Ukraine or you don't help Ukraine in some way, there is no real reason for Russia to end this war if they can acquire swaths of land and they already have the military advantage over Ukraine. If the United States does not help Ukraine, there's no real reason or no real pressure on the Russians to end the conflict. That's why Trump recently has been more charitable to Ukraine and NATO in general. And NATO, they all upped their defense spending to 5% of their GDP outside of Spain. And Trump is very happy about that. But the question is, this is a big picture thing. You look at this, now you've got another meeting between Trump and Putin. For all the bumps in the relationship and now Trump almost on Ukraine's side, there still is this respect you can see between the counterparts. They had the neutral meeting in Alaska. They're having another meeting now. The question is, when it comes to Russia, what do they want out of this? I think most people agree that they want Ukraine, whether it's a Russian puppet state, whether it's just rid of the Western influence. They want the encroachment of NATO. They want the ambitions of NATO to be thwarted. And they think that NATO overstepped and is overstepping within Ukraine. And so the result they want is there to be no real Western influence within Ukraine as it borders Russia. And so The other thing is, well, because we have Trump and Putin, and certainly if there was a Democrat in, this wouldn't be happening. Because Trump is more open to negotiating and talking to the Russians, could this lead to some type of agreement or some type of an alliance within the Arctic, as the United States and Donald Trump have emphasized expanding Arctic control, literally expanding Arctic control with potentially the annexation of Greenland? That's a lot of territory that is within the Arctic Circle. We know with where Russia is located, just in terms of their geography, they have a lot of control in and around the northern areas and the Arctic Ocean and the Arctic Circle, with land masses within the Arctic Circle. And so would it make sense for the United States? And we know the United States, because of the ownership of Alaska, we are right on the border of, or almost right on the border of Russia. You've got the Bering Strait. You have the idea now of the United States and Russia combining to build some type of underground tunnel that would make trade a lot easier. It would make resource extraction a lot easier. It would be a symbolic peace move to team up and build this potential tunnel, whether or not people think it's worth it, because it would cost a lot of money. I mean, Elon Musk does have the Boring Company. They dig the tunnels. They've done it in Las Vegas, I believe, and other major cities to try and mitigate the traffic problems. But now there's an entirely new, ambitious thing. People talk about the land bridge connecting Alaska to Russia, and there's like the funny thought of, well, when it freezes, the Bering Strait freezes, you can walk across it and go from Russia to the United States because of Alaska and our ownership of Alaska. But this would be something that would be very ambitious. I think this is something that would be right up Trump's alley. I don't know if this would ever happen, some type of tunnel. I'm not sure it's worth it in terms of the amount it would cost. You can see they pitch it, and they said it could reduce it. I guess they're saying the cost of it could be around $8 billion. But they say this is very important. Could be a railroad and cargo link, unlocks joint resource exploration, creating new jobs. So it's just a bunch of... But listen, I think the overall point is the United States and Russia, even with all of this recent funding of Ukraine, Trump now changing his tune on Russia, there still is a mutual respect. There still are long phone calls. There still are in-person meetings between Trump and Putin. Those things are extremely important when it comes to, at a certain point, Russia coming to the negotiating table, and by the way, still having leverage and the ability to negotiate with the United States as a facilitator for some type of peace within Ukraine. And again, this is fully facilitated by Trump. And this is directly, we can see, because with the Middle East, a little bit harder. We don't know all the behind the scenes stuff going on there. There's all those different Middle Eastern countries involved. This is very clear and obvious. The West does not like Russia. Trump is the only one trying to facilitate peace. And by the way, he's been stern on it. It's not like these peace deals are, oh yeah, let's give Russia half of Ukraine and call it a day. That's not what's going on here. They get 2 oblasts, which they've already controlled, and they're mainly Russian speaking. Now, I'm not saying taking over area is necessarily good, but it would be about 19, or I think maybe like 15% of the total land area of Ukraine. It's not like you're giving up half of Ukraine to Russia and it's, oh, Trump is cucking to Russia. That's not what's going on. That's why Russia is not taking the offers from Trump, where they proposed 2 different offers. They met in Alaska and one of the offers was proposed, and Putin says thanks, but no thanks. Putin just wanted the meeting with Trump. The question is, are the Russians ready to come and say, listen, all of this funding for Ukraine, let's just, well, we have leverage and all the military expenditure we spent on this war, we could stop it. We can have a better economic situation. The sanctions can be lifted, and we can have some type of deal with the United States as they try and increase their ambitions within the Arctic areas. And Russia has plenty of access to the Arctic Ocean and the Arctic Circle, and the United States is trying to, right now, where they really only have Alaska. I mean, yeah, we have partners, we have deals, and allies like Canada. We could have more access, but the ownership is really only of Alaska, and that's one of the main reasons why Trump wants Greenland. And so you could understand there potentially being a situation to where the United States and Russia could work together. This is a little bit I don't want to say far-fetched, but the problem is, well, how long is Trump going to be president? Around 3 years, a little bit more than that. Maybe if Vance takes over, it's going to be fine. But if a Democrat takes over, is there really still going to be? I mean, if the United States and Russia partners up on some type of alliance, how long is that really going to last under Democratic leadership? So that's another thing to look at. But to me, if there is some type of peace deal, and the way I look at it, you look at what happened with Israel and Hamas. Remember everything that got reported? Even I was saying, because there was such little information, at least I had seen on it, if there's some type of peace deal, there was going to have to be annexed territory. Well, there's no annexed territory. Now, this is a little bit different because this is an actual invasion. There will be annexed territory of Ukraine, but it's extremely mild versus the whole idea of Trump being this Russian puppet. If you look at the peace deals that the administration has laid out for Russia, they're very fair. Russia is not getting half or even a third of Ukraine. They're having to retreat from the areas they currently occupy in some of those eastern oblasts, like fully retreat, and they just have access to the two. And another thing I think that could happen because of the Donbass region, in which is controlled right now under military control by Russia, I do think there could be some type of mineral deal with the United States and Russia in that region. That's another thing that could happen and could facilitate the end to this war. But I do think this is going to have to be facilitated if Russia is going to end this with some type of assurance from the United States and some type of deal from the US, to where Russia says, okay, we're fine with ending this, but there are some sticking points, just like there's still some sticking points with the multi-phase plan in the Middle East, to where it's like, well, they want Ukraine's army downsized to the point to where, they want them demilitarized. Is that something that Ukraine would be willing to do, or the Western European countries would be willing to do? Probably not, since an invasion just happened 3.5, 4 years ago. Why would they do that? Why would they trust Russia not to reinvade? So that's a sticking point that would have to be worked out through negotiations, and I haven't seen it worked out. That's one of the reasons why I think this is continuing, and it's just overall more negotiating leverage for Russia. Russia looks at this, it is a numbers game. Their intel, I'm guessing, is saying, well, Ukraine is getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and this is a historical Russian, fact that they do kind of grind out wars, and certainly they have the manpower advantage. The question is does the expenditure on this war, is it really worth it, considering the front line of the war has barely moved, and the territory that they've gained, as they continue to gain territory in certain towns, as we enter another winter, the amount of land that they're gaining is not significant. So that's another question. So there's a lot to talk about, but I would say at a certain point, there's just so many conversations between Trump and Putin. You would think at one of these meetings, there would be some give, and the give, I believe, has to come from Russia. They're the one that is, they invaded Ukraine. They're the one that started the war. They're the ones that can really end it if they want to. I guess, the United States could end it if they said, hey, we're going to give you all of Ukraine, then Russia would end it for sure, but that's not realistic. Like, a realistic ending would likely hinge on the Russians saying, okay, we're ready to negotiate, and actually negotiate in good faith, and we're going to take some area of Ukraine, just like the Trump administration said was going to happen, because at this point, there's just no realistic way you can get that land back for Ukraine outside of major escalation. Because think about the amount of money that the Russians have spent just to acquire, or I guess take over that land through war, and the amount of bloodshed that's been had for that land by the Russians. Imagine the Russians were forced to forfeit that. Putin would be ousted. There'd be some type of coup. It would be a completely destabilized situation within Russia. So it really wouldn't, it's not realistic for them to have no land outside of Russia, their economy like collapsing through some crazy sanctions, which is not going to happen because the sanctions are still on Russia and it's not collapsing. A lot of that is because they're selling all their oil now to India. They've always been selling it to China, but now they're selling it to India. And so that's helping them stay afloat. And that's why Trump wanted to tariff India to hell, because they were helping Russia. Because Trump wanted Russia to come to the negotiating table and kind of pigeonhole them and say, hey, you can't sell your oil, your energy to India. Now you must negotiate with us. We're willing to take our sanctions off of you if you negotiate the end of this war in Eastern Europe. So when it comes to something like this, could we see a tunnel? Is there a potential advantage of doing it? I don't know what the cost would be. I mean, that's seems like it would be very costly to drill a tunnel, but if they end up doing it, I do think it will help with trade and direct access from the United States to Russia, and over a longer period of time, you could save significant money, and you could also create some type of mineral deal with Russia to be able to bring minerals from the United States to Russia, Russia to the United States. They have the largest amount of natural resources out of any country. And so that's another thing that might be looked into. I mean, we're going to have some type of resource deal with Russia. I mean, we've been going through it with the Chinese, and really it's actually not even a resource problem for the United States. It's a refinement problem with the Chinese and just total control over it. And they also have a monopoly over the cobalt because of their actions in Africa and the predatory loans that they give out. It's real bad. But either way, this could help us. And this is like, it's like this whole idea of, oh, it's World War III. Trump is now driving India closer to Russia and China. Well, are China and Russia really that close? They're close they're kind of close because they have to be. Because when you've got a monumental defense, you want to call it a defense, I mean, it is a defense agreement, but they have been expanding their defense agreement. So, but NATO, I'm talking about, when you have got something like that on the Western side of the world, you kind of have to come closer and have some type of relationship. But can Trump maybe bring Russia away from China? Is that something that we could see him do? And, if this ends up working out, this is a huge win for the administration. There's no doubt about it. So if you get a peace deal with them, think about this. You got a peace deal with Israel and Hamas. You get a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. I'm not saying the Russia-Ukraine thing is going to happen just because they've met so many times, but I do think at a certain point, even with everything that's happened with Trump and Putin and the he said thing and the meetings not going anywhere, and Trump and Melania Trump getting angry, and now Melania Trump having direct access to Russia and talking. There's this cohesion and this mutual respect you can see between both of these countries right now and their leaders. And so I think that creates a potential situation where we can have some type of peace agreement that would be facilitated through the United States and Russia having some type of agreement. The United States expanding the ambitions into the Arctic areas, including Greenland, maybe international support from Russia on the annexation of Greenland. That's something that could help. And, it would be the annexation of a few territory or a few oblasts within Ukraine for Russia, because that's what's just going to happen. I mean, there's no way. If the war continues, I believe it's only going to get worse for Ukraine because of the manpower disadvantage. And it's not like there's the NATO troops coming in to save Ukraine, because those NATO countries do not want to be involved. They want to wear Russia down. But how do you really wear Russia down if Russia is now just selling all of their oil to India, so their economy is still staying afloat? And on top of that, Russia is getting troops from North Korea. They've got a serious manpower advantage. It seems like the opposite would happen. It seems like Ukraine would be worn down, even with the technological advantage, with the technology coming via NATO and the weaponry coming via NATO that can hold them and booster them for a time period. But how long until the sheer numbers catch up to the Ukrainians? So it's like, the longer the war goes on, you could argue either way, because it's more military expenditure by the Russians for such little land gain, at least the past 3 years. But it's also, the longer it goes on, the less manpower that the Ukrainians have. So it's like, well, is that maybe more of a leverage play for Russia to continue and prolong this conflict, to where if Ukraine is really hurting in 6 months or a year, the Russians can say, we demand X, Y, and Z, and you kind of have to give it to us, because if the war continues, it's going to be very, very bad for you. So, there's a lot of that stuff going on, but I do think if this ends up happening, I mean, this is whether people think this is worth it. I mean, you do have direct flow of resources. You build some type of tunnel, the connection, and really, I mean, you're talking about, well, what if these countries have issues in the future? They're adversaries. There's going to be an invasion. I mean, with how close the countries are anyways, this tunnel would not be, it's more of like a symbolic sign of peace between the countries versus this being anything crazy like, oh, one of the countries is going to use this tunnel to, I mean, technically, you know, the Bering Strait ice is up, and it's, you can walk over the ice, and you can walk from Russia to, you know, Alaska, and Alaska is not even, you know, obviously not connected to the lower 48. You've still got Canada there, so it's like a buffer anyways. It doesn't even, it wouldn't even, there wouldn't be anything like that to worry about. So, this is it's an ambitious idea. I know Trump probably likes things like this. I don't know if it would get pitched to him. But I just think there would probably have to be some type of alliance that Russia would demand with the United States. And again, you look at Trump and Putin's relationship, even though they're going through these tedious negotiations and Russia doesn't want to negotiate, and, you know, there still is this respect between both parties that I think eventually will foster some type of peace deal during Trump's second term. Now, we can say, well, we thought it was going to happen immediately. It hasn't happened. So why should we expect it to happen? There's another phone call. There's another meeting. We've seen this 100 times. I agree. But at a certain point, I think, you know, Russia's going to say, we've had enough. We want to do a deal. We still have enough leverage to be able to do this and get out of this. And we want the sanctions to be lifted. And Putin can say, well, we got territory within you. The key is what happens to the Ukrainian government. That's, I think, the key. And also what happens to their military. Does it stay under Western control or like Western favoritism? Or is Zelensky replaced? Is there a way to do it to where there's some type of neutral leadership? Or, you know, because that's really the key. I think what is the future of Ukraine? Because if you're Putin, this is an invasion that happened. Even if you get 2 oblasts, does that really accomplish much if you've still got that NATO encroachment? And how do you sell that to your people? That war was worth it? That the bloodshed, the Russians lost, the military expenditure, was that really worth it? It's really hard to say. So guys, either way, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Links to that's always in the description.